I mention to you the missile man of India, do you know whom I'm talking about? Yes, it's our very own APJ Abdul Kalam. And so this chapter is an autobiography of Mr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Now, before we move on, I want you to understand, and I'm sure you know it also, what is the difference between an autobiography and a biography? Yes, autobiography is something the individual does himself. He writes himself, about himself, right? And biography is when someone else writes it for you. Yes, that's the difference in autobiography and biography. So currently what we are going to cover in chapter 6 of your Beehive is My Childhood from the Horse's Mouth, APJ Abdul Kalam. Now this is an extract from one of his famous books, Wings of Fire. So let's move on and see the interesting things that have happened in his life and how he actually moved on, crossing all of them. So first about him, for those who don't know, what does the APJ stand for? So it's Abul Pakir Jainul-Abdin Abdul Kalam. Now, he was an Indian scientist who played a leading role in the development of India's missile and nuclear weapons programs. He served as the 11th President of India. His tenure was from 2002 to 2007. Till 2007, he served as the President. He studied physics and aerospace engineering at Madras Institute of Technology. Kalam wrote several books and received numerous awards. He was awarded the country's highest honors, the Padma Vibhushan in 1990 and the Bharat Ratna in 1997. So, quite a bit information about him. Now, let's see what is the plot all about. So, in My Childhood, APJ Abdul Kalam talks about his childhood days in this autobiographical account. He talks about his parents, his childhood friends, and his experiences at school. He grew up in a traditional society. People of different religions lived in that society. But in spite of different religions, people lived in peace and harmony. He was greatly influenced by his father, who taught him honesty and self-discipline. He was at it till his last moment. Written in a very humble and a modest manner, the extract is very inspirational. I mean, he is a role model to so many people because the way he lived, the quality of the life he lived, all that he did for the society was amazing. It was more than amazing. So yes, let's go on to hear Unki Kahani, Unki Zubani. So, I was born into a middle-class Tamil family in the island town of Rameshwaram in the erstwhile Madras state. What do you mean by erstwhile? Former. The former Madras state, which was before. My father, Jainul-Abdin, had neither much formal education nor much wealth. Despite these disadvantages, he possessed great innate wisdom and a true generosity of spirit. So, his father was not from a very wealthy family. His background wasn't really that, the royal families. That was not the case. His father he didn't even have any formal education, nor was he wealthy, but he definitely possessed great innate wisdom. That means inborn, a quality or a feeling in one's nature. He was wise as he was born. By default, it comes into them. That's innate. And a true generosity of spirit, the quality of being kind and generous. So that is how his dad was. And I'm sure because it was in the father, I'm sure it must have been in the son too. He had an ideal helpmate in my mother, Ashiyama. I do not recall the exact number of people she fed every day, but I am quite certain that far more outsiders ate with us than all the members of our own family put together. Now, his mom's name is Ashiyamma. Now, she used to feed people every day. And he never said, he said, I don't even know how can I count it. I cannot even get the exact number she would feed. She would just keep feeding them. And what he says was the outsiders were way more than our own family members put together. So there used to be so many more. I was one of the many children, a short boy. So, you know, he had 4 siblings. There were 5 of them. He was the youngest. A short boy with rather undistinguished looks, born to tall and handsome parents. Now, undistinguished looks as in very ordinary look, nothing special, nothing great really. But the parents were nice and tall and the father was really handsome. We lived in our ancestral house, which was built in the middle of the 19th century. It was a fairly large pakka house. Pakka and kacha we all know, right? So pakka is the solid and the permanent. They had a proper concrete house made of limestone and brick on the mosque street in Rameshwaram. My austere father used to avoid all inessential comforts and luxuries. What do you mean, my simple, strict and severe father? That's where he calls him austere father. He was very simple, he was very, very strict and extremely severe. So he used to avoid all the inessential, the things which were not at all, they were not really absolutely necessary. All those comforts he used to keep away, and luxuries, all the inessential and expensive items. He used to just keep them away. He used to just avoid all of them. However, all necessities were provided for in terms of food, medicine or clothes. The basic things what were required, yes, they used to come, but nothing that was not required, actually the inessentials, definitely not. They used to be put away. In fact, I would say mine was a very secure childhood, both materially and emotionally. He was a very, the family, the way it used to work, the way it used to operate, on the principles. So he felt very secure, very safe in that family. That's what he says, his childhood, because he was very well taken care of. He got whatever he wanted, be it materially, like whatever the materialistic possessions that he got, and emotionally. Emotionally also he was well taken care of, because the father was really strict and he used to make sure everything was well disciplined. So he was nice and safe. He had a very secured childhood. Now, the Second World War broke out in 1939 when I was 8 years old. He was just 8 when the Second World War broke out. For reasons I have never been able to understand, a sudden demand for tamarind seeds erupted in the market. I mean, he was shocked. He said, like, when there was the Second World War, for what reasons he never understood, that a sudden demand for tamarind seeds erupted in the market. People in the market started looking for more of tamarind seeds and he could not understand why. I used to collect the seeds and sell them to a provision shop on Mosque Street. A day's collection would fetch me the princely sum of 1 anna. Now, suddenly there was demand. So what he used to do was, he was free. So what he would do is, he would go on collecting them and then he would go and sell them to a provision shop. And after doing that, what he would get was, it would get him princely sum, as in a good amount, a generous amount of 1 anna. Now, we all know it is an old Indian coin worth about 6 paise. So that 1 anna in those days was like maybe 100 rupees or 500 rupees. It was pretty worthwhile. My brother-in-law Jalaluddin would tell me stories about the war, which I would later attempt to trace in the headlines in Dinamani. Now, his brother-in-law would tell him stories about the war. Now, he was a tiny boy, right? He was just 8 years old. So, he would, enjoy listening to those stories. And then later, he would find the same in the headlines of Dinamani. Dinamani was the Tamil daily newspaper. So, he would find all those stories as the headlines over there. Our area, being isolated, was completely unaffected by the war. Now, the place where they were staying, it was totally isolated. It was away from the actual place, where all the things, the war and this was going on. So, there where they would stay was different. So, they were not affected at all by the war. But soon, India was forced to join the Allied forces and something like a state of emergency was declared. Now, Allied forces, we are all aware, the armies of UK, USA and Russia during the Second World War. Now, this all we have done in our history. I don't think we need to repeat. So, yeah, of course, India was forced to join the Allied forces, and then something like a state of emergency was declared. Now, the first effect came in the form of the suspension of the train halt at Rameshwaram station. Now, there was this train which used to pass, it used to not pass, it used to stop at Rameshwaram station, but that was stopped. Suspension means it was not allowed. Now, the train would go directly to another station, but it would not stop at Rameshwaram. Now, that was the first effect. But the problem was, the newspapers now had to be bundled and thrown out of the moving train on the Rameshwaram road between Rameshwaram and Dhanushkodi. Now, it used to, the next stop was Dhanushkodi. But before that, when the train would be on Rameshwaram road, what would happen is, now there were newspapers in that train which used to come, and then they used to be distributed. So what they had to do, they had to just throw those newspapers so that they can distribute over there. But the train was not stopping, so there was a problem. So that forced my cousin Samsudin, who distributed newspapers in Rameshwaram, to look for a helping hand to catch the bundles. Now, they were supposed to throw the bundles from the moving train. Right? Now, the train was not halting at Rameshwaram. So, the people in the train would have thrown the newspapers, and Samsudin, his cousin, wanted someone to catch those bundles. And as if naturally, I filled the slot. And obviously, I pitched in. I told him, okay, I shall come with you and I shall, hold those bundles which they will be throwing from the train, and then you can distribute. Samsudin helped me earn my first wages. For this, his cousin actually paid him a salary, and that was his first pay. He was very, very proud of the same. Half a century later, now half a century, this was like, 50 years back, I can still feel the surge of pride. Even then, he says, even now, I feel so proud. I get that real good feeling, that in my earning my own money for the first time, he actually helped me. This was the first money I earned by working. Someone actually paid me for the same. So he felt really good about this. Even 50 years later, he had that same emotion. He had that same good feeling coming to him. Every child is born with some inherited characteristics into a specific socio-economic and social environment and trained in certain ways by figures of authority. Now, what happens here is, here he says that every child is born with certain characteristics. Now, the characteristics are already there. He is born with it, right? Into a specific socio-economic and emotional environment. That's wherever you are born, the place around you. And you are trained in certain ways by figures of authority. Now, figures of authority are who? At home, first, they are your parents. Right? The mother is the first guru, and then comes the teacher. So even they have authority over the children, right? So these are the figures of authority. They train you, right? I inherited honesty and self-discipline from my father. You remember right in the beginning when we were talking about his father, right? I already told you that honesty and self-discipline obviously from the father comes to the child quite oftenly. And from my mother, I inherited faith in goodness and deep kindness, and so did my 3 brothers and sister. Now, he said from the father, he got honesty and self-discipline. From the mother, what did he get? He got faith in goodness. We have all heard, kar bhala to ho bhala. So you have to do good. Keep doing good, irrespective of the situation, irrespective of the circumstances. Keep doing good and keep being kind. Be compassionate. Yes, that's what he got from his mom. Now, even his siblings, who were his siblings? The eldest one was a sister. After that, there were 3 brothers, and then it was he himself. So basically, they were 5 children. I had 3 close friends in my childhood: Ramananda Shastri, Aravindan, and Shiva Prakashan. Now, they were his very good close friends. All these boys were from orthodox Hindu Brahmin families. Now remember, Mr. Abdul Kalam was a Muslim, but his friends, they were all from Hindu Brahmin families, that also orthodox. As children, none of us ever felt any difference amongst ourselves because of our religious differences and upbringing. He says, as children, the way we were all brought up, we were brought up with the mindset that everyone is equal. There is no indiscrimination. There are no religious differences, right? He being a Muslim, don't make friends with him. He being a Hindu, don't make friendship with him. Nothing of the sort. Everyone was treated equally. In fact, Ramananda Shastri was the son of Pakshi Lakshmana Shastri, the high priest of the Rameshwaram temple. Now just imagine, his friend was the son of the high priest at the temple. So that good, that at that level the dad was, but still the son wasn't taught that don't make friendship with him because he's a Muslim. There was nothing like that. Later, he took over the priesthood of the Rameshwaram temple from his father. So obviously, the son carried on the tradition. He also became the priest in the same temple. Aravindan went into business of arranging transport for visiting pilgrims. Now, Rameshwaram, we all know, is a pilgrimage. Like, people come there because it's a holy place, right? So people who visit these holy places are called pilgrims, right? So don't look at the words and get, puzzled. They're very simple to understand. And his third friend, Shiva Prakashan, became a catering contractor. He started dealing with food. He started supplying food for the Southern Railways. He was doing that. He got into catering and he was into the Southern Railways. Now, during the annual Sri Sita Rama Kalyanam ceremony, our family used to arrange boats with a special platform for carrying idols of the Lord from the temple to the marriage site situated in the middle of the pond called Ramatirtha, which was near our house. Now, let's not forget, the whole family was a Muslim. And what are we talking about? We are talking of Sri Sita Rama Kalyanam. Now, this was a Hindu festival. Now, being Muslims, they used to participate. In spite of being Muslims, they used to participate in this. And what his family would do, they would arrange boats with a special platform. On the boat, they would have a proper platform. And what would happen? The idols means an image or a representation of a god, the statues, right, of Lord Sita and Rama. Those idols used to be taken from the temple. They were pretty huge. So they would be taken from the temple, they would be put in that boat on that special platform. Then in the pond where there used to be a marriage, in the middle of the pond. And which was the pond? The pond's name was Ramatirtha. Right? So those idols used to be taken from the temple into those boats, and that boat would take the idols to the marriage site, the place where the marriage was supposed to be held, right in the middle of the pond Ramatirtha, which was near our house. That pond was actually near Abdul Kalam's house. Events from the Ramayana and from the life of the Prophet were the bedtime stories my mother and grandmother would tell the children in our family. See, right from childhood, the seeds of equality were born in them. The mother and the grandmother, she would narrate stories of the Ramayana. And the Prophet. Prophet is who? A person regarded as an inspired teacher or proclaimer of the will of God. So, prophets are the Muslim leaders. Yes. Now, Ramayana and the Muslim stories, like all, they got both equally from the mother and the grandmother, and all the children would get to know about it. So, basically the seeds of equality they were sown then itself. Yeah, they used to hear them as bedtime stories. One day when I was in the 5th standard at the Rameshwaram Elementary School, a new teacher came to our class. Now, he's talking about an incident when he was in school. I used to wear a cap which marked me as a Muslim. Now, he was a Muslim, and they wear a particular cap. And I always sat in the front row next to Ramananda Shastri, his close friend, who wore the sacred thread. Sacred thread is a cord, it is a thread worn by the Hindus of the 3 upper castes. They have that thread across, they call that the janya. I don't know if you know it, but there is a sacred thread which these people, especially the Brahmins and these upper castes, they used to wear. So they used to both sit together, one with the Muslim cap and the second would sit with that sacred thread. Now, the new teacher was not aware of anything. That poor fellow, you'll see what happened to him. The new teacher could not stomach means he could not tolerate, he could not take what? A Hindu priest's son. Who was he? Ramananda Shastri. Sitting with a Muslim boy. Who was the Muslim boy? Abdul Kalam. Now, they both were sitting together. In accordance with our social ranking, that's the relative position of people in a society, as the new teacher saw it, I was asked to go and sit on the back bench. Now, the new teacher did not know what he was doing. He actually did not know what he was doing. So, what he told Abdul Kalam is, he told him, you go and sit on the back bench. Now, this was as per the social ranking. Okay. I felt very sad, and so did Ramananda Shastri. Now, both were very sad. They were close friends. They used to sit together, and suddenly someone tells them, you go and sit behind. So, they were feeling bad about it. He looked utterly downcast as I shifted to my seat in the last row. Now, when he moved away from there, Ramananda Shastri felt depressed. He was very sad. He did not like the idea of them separating. The image of him weeping when I shifted to the last row left a lasting impression on me. He says, when I saw him crying because I was shifted to the last row, till day I remember that scene. It lay a very, deep impression in my heart, the way he cried for me. And it was not just about being close, but the way he was treated. He was rather ill-treated, Kalam. That is why Shastri did not like it. He started crying because he knew they never had any differences. They were very equal in every way. But the new teacher was not aware of all this. He just felt, how can a Hindu and a Muslim be seated together as per the social ranking? After school, we went home and told our respective parents about the incident. You know, when anything happens in school and being so young, you always want to go home and tell, Mom, you know what happened? Dad, you know this happened. You share it with them, right? And it's good to share. It's a good thing. Lakshmana Shastri summoned the teacher, Ramananda Shastri's dad. Okay? He summoned the teacher. Summoned as in he ordered that teacher to be present in front of him, and in our presence told the teacher that he should not spread the poison of social inequality and communal intolerance in the minds of the innocent children. He says, being a teacher, you are not supposed to do it in the first place. You are not going to spread the poison of social inequality. Here, everyone is equal. You cannot do this inequality here. And communal intolerance, as in relating to a community, unwillingness to accept. There's nothing that we don't accept Muslims. It's all the same. In the minds of the innocent children, the children have an innocent mind. What you feed in that mind, it will happen. So don't do this nonsense. He bluntly asked the teacher. He put it very straight to the teacher. You know what he said? He bluntly asked the teacher to either apologize or quit the school and the island. He told him, either you say sorry for what you have done. You shouldn't have done it in the first place. Or else, if you don't want to apologize, if your ego is troubling you, then in that case, you quit the school and the island. You go away from this place also. We don't want people who are going to spread poison in the innocent minds. Not only did the teacher regret his behavior, he regretted pachtana. He regretted a lot, feel repentant or disappointed. He regretted his behavior, but the strong sense of conviction Lakshmana Shastri conveyed ultimately reformed this young leader. In fact, what happened was the teacher was in for a big change. What happened? The strong sense of conviction. Conviction as in a strong opinion or a belief that, you know, all are equal. That's what Lakshmana Shastri taught him. In fact, told him. He conveyed ultimately, as in he communicated a message, reformed this young teacher. It changed as to improve. In fact, the young teacher was happy with that belief. He accepted that belief that yes, all are one, there is no difference, no social inequality. And he changed for the better. The teacher himself changed for the better. On the whole, the small society of Rameshwaram was very rigid in terms of the segregation of different social groups. Rigid as in they were very strict. And what segregation you're talking about? Enforced segregation of what? Which small groups? You know, you had the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas and the Shudras. Yes, that they kept intact. That they were very strict about. So, however, my science teacher, now Abdul Kalam is talking about his science teacher, Siva Subramanya Iyer, though an orthodox Brahmin, orthodox as in they were very strict to their beliefs. They used to stick, we have to do this means we have to do this. That is how orthodox was. Rather, that is. Though an orthodox Brahmin with a very conservative wife, conservative as in she was not ready to change. She would not welcome change. She was very conservative. Like, okay, what it is. Nothing happens to it. Was something of a rebel. Now, he wanted to oppose his teacher, his science teacher. He did his best to break the social barriers so that people from varying backgrounds could mingle easily. Mingle as in they would engage with others. They would mix, they would talk, they would go to each other. That's how he tried. He says though there were these differences, these different groups, he wanted to break these social barriers. He had tried a lot of times so that everyone moves together, you know, as one family. They would all mix with each other. He used to spend hours with me and would say, Kalam, I want you to develop so that you are on par with the highly educated people of the big cities. Now, the science teacher found the potential in Abdul Kalam. He told him, you know what, I want you to develop so that you are on par, you are equal with the highly educated people living in the big cities. I want you to go at that level. One day, he invited me to his home for a meal. Now, he invited the student. His wife was horrified at the idea of a Muslim boy being invited to dine in her ritually pure kitchen. Now, her kitchen was absolutely pure. No one should ever enter her kitchen. It was ritually pure, as in kept protected from all outside influences for the observances of religion. So, as per the religion, remember, she was conservative. She did not want any changes. Yes, so she was absolutely horrified. Imagine a Muslim boy coming to my house. No ways. And then he would be invited to dine in that kitchen which has been so pure for years. She refused to serve me in her kitchen. She did not allow me to enter the kitchen. Siva Subramanya Iyer was not perturbed. Perturbed as in he was not feeling angry or anxiety or concern. He did not bother because he knew his wife, how she was, and his nature was absolutely the opposite. He was like a rebel. He wanted to oppose all this, and it was at home. The main thing was he had to begin at home. So, because she did not serve Abdul Kalam in the kitchen, in her own kitchen, he did not get any anxiety. He did not bother. Nor did he get angry with his wife, but instead served me with his own hands and sat down beside me to eat his meal. He was such a compassionate person. He said, okay, fine, if she is not serving, no problem. I will serve my student. Yes, and then he sat beside him and they both ate together. His wife watched us from behind the kitchen door. She was watching right from behind the kitchen door. I wondered whether she had observed any difference in the way I ate rice, drank water, or cleaned the floor after the meal. Now he was like, what? Why did she do it? Did I eat any differently than my teacher? Did I drink water any differently, or did I clean the floor any differently? We did the same things and we did it in the same manner, in the same way. So why am I being treated differently? When I was leaving his house, Siva Subramanya Iyer invited me to join him for dinner again the next weekend. Now just imagine, knowing the fact that his wife is not liking the idea of a Muslim eating in their house, yet he invited him once again for dinner at the next weekend. Observing my hesitation, and he was like, again, after he saw what treatment he had got, he was a little doubtful. He said, no, I don't think so. He told me not to get upset, saying, once you decide to change the system, such problems have to be confronted. His teacher said, look, I want to change this. I know such problems will come in front of me. Confront means I will have to face up to and dealt with a problem, situation or a difficulty. I will have to face such difficulties, and they begin at my own house. Yeah. So he says, don't worry, I know I'm going to face these issues, but don't worry, you please come for dinner the next weekend. When I visited his house the next week, Jadoo, there was magic. What was it? Siva Subramanya Iyer's wife took me inside her kitchen and she served me food with her own hands. So you see, the mission, at least at home, of Mr. Iyer's house, there he achieved it. At least the wife, who was actually described as conservative, she was now flexible. She warmly welcomed Abdul Kalam into her house, and she also served him food with her own hands. What a drastic change. What a beautiful change. Then the Second World War was over and India's freedom was imminent. Imminent as in it was about to happen. Indians will build their own India, declared Gandhiji. Gandhiji said, whatever, once the British rule is gone, Indians will build their own India. The whole country was filled with an unprecedented optimism, as in an unparalleled, something very new, and all were hopeful, confident about the future success of something. Everyone was dead sure that this is going to happen. India is definitely going to get its freedom. The spirit of everybody was so high, nobody could go at equal with it. It was unparalleled. It was such high spirit. I asked my father for permission to leave Rameshwaram and study at the district headquarters in Ramanathapuram. Now, he had grown up. And so, he took his dad's permission. He told him, he said, look, I want to leave from here and I want to go and study at the district headquarters in Ramanathapuram. Now, he was growing big. So, obviously, he had to keep moving on. He told me as if thinking aloud. He told me that as if he was thinking, Abul, I know you have to go away to grow. He says, I know you have to grow up, and for the same you have to fly away from here. Does the seagull not fly across the sun alone and without a nest? So even a seagull does that. It flies alone. It flies, across the sun. It goes, it faces challenges. It goes alone and without a nest, no home. But it flies. He quoted Khalil Gibran to my hesitant mother. Now, mothers always have a soft heart. No, they never want to give permission. They don't want their children to go away from them, right? So she was a little she didn't feel like. Hesitant means she was not ready. But these are the words he quoted to his wife. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. He says the children are not yours. They are the children of life's longing for itself. They have to grow up. They have to learn. They have to keep moving on. They have to progress in life. They come through you, but not from you. They come through you. Now, of course, the child is the parents. Biologically, yes, it's the parents, but they don't come from you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts. Yes, you can love your children unconditionally, but you cannot give your own thoughts to them. What is your thinking process may not be the same. Why? Because they have their own thoughts. They're born with, they have that ability. They have their own thoughts. They have their own ways of exploring life. See, these days, if you look at it, it is the case. Your mindset is way different from your parents, way different from your grandparents, isn't it? Right? It's very difficult to actually match. Why? Because these are three different generations. They are born at different times. They've grown up in different circumstances. So everyone comes with their own thought process. It cannot be what the grandmother is thinking, the mother should think, and the child should think. Not possible. Definitely not possible. Yeah. So this is how come to this wonderful end of this beautiful autobiography. This is how Abdul Kalam brings it to an end. And he says, identity was partly heritage, partly upbringing, but mostly the choices you make in life. This is by Patricia Briggs. Says, your identity is, it is partly heritage and partly upbringing. It all depends on how you are also upbringing and, how your upbringing has been done. But mostly the choices you make in life. Yes, children, the choices that you make, and there are so many things in your life where you have to make your decisions, where you have to choose the correct ways, and for that, you have to make sure that you choose them wisely. Yes, and of course, under the guidance, with the guidance of your parents, right? So, keep being good and keep being kind, keep watching and keep learning.